Okay, 1 second. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to read this again. So Rhonda, we're so privileged to have you today. Thank you so much.
Take two.
Rhonda, Attar, and her husband, Rabbi Meir Attar, are the co-founders of the Tomer Devorah 24/7 base midrash, Kol Chatzot, Rabbinical Seminary, mikvahs, and food distribution in Kochav Yaakov, dedicated to V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, love your neighbor like yourself. And Rhonda runs the Women's Based Medrash in English, where she teaches on a regular basis. She's also the author of the critically acclaimed young adult series, the Alicia Davidson trilogy, Alicia Davidson and the Letters of Fire, Alicia Davidson.
And the Ispiclaria. Oops, you're frozen.
Rhonda, are you there or are you?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, just give me a second.
I think you froze.
Okay, your co-host.
Okay, thank you. So I am going to, 1 second, get this going. 1 minute. Okay. All right. So we should be set. I am hoping now, ladies, do you see my screen?
Yes,
Yeah,
we see it. Perfect.
Okay, fantastic. Okay. So first of all, Naomi, thank you so much for inviting me to this forum of Kedusha. And I really hope that we have an amazing opportunity today for Avodat Hashem that we can do together. So Bezrat Hashem, I'm going to try to give you a lesson from Mesilat Yesharim with the commentary from Vilba Vizra of Itamar Schwartz. In case anybody doesn't know, this is the book that we've been using. Actually, there's 3 krachim, 3 volumes to it. And Baruch Hashem, we have 2 groups of women here that are seriously learning Mesilat Yesharim. I mean, Lamaisa, like we're trying to practice it and we're trying to do it. And not simple. And we actually have 2 different shiurim, one's in the 2nd year, one's in the 1st year. We used to do them in the Beit Midrash pre-COVID, but now, of course, we're on to Zoom. And the lesson that we're going to try to give over today is what we like to call the power of the pause. And this is something that really resonated with all of the women, but it also includes very practical and fundamental lesson from Mesilat Yesharim. But before we go into that, just in case, just quickly, for those who might not know, what is Mesilat Yesharim? It's called Path of the Just in English, and it was written by an amazing Torah holy sage called the Ramchal. And it's basically a timeless masterpiece for, building souls or spiritual growth, or what we call Musar. And the Ramchal's classic work was written quite a long time ago in the 1700s, but it's still considered, like the magnum opus for Musar. The Vilna Gaon, who wasn't alive at the time, Ramchal wasn't alive at the time, he said he would have walked on foot and learned at the feet of the Ramchal had he still been alive. And he even goes on to say there's not one single extra word in this Mesilat Yesharim. So, what is this path of the just, or this path of Mesilat Yesharim? So in a nutshell, just so we understand what we're studying, it's kind of like a 10-step program for Avodat Hashem. Like, how do you get closer to Hashem? How do you get to things like dveikut, to improve ourselves spiritually, to expand our nishamot, our soul development, our midot? So actually, he has a whole 10-step program that starts with Torah study and works its way up to Kedusha and to Yirat Chet, and until a person could even achieve Ruach Kodesh. He even says that everybody can achieve that if they were to follow his steps. Because ultimately, one of the things that Ramchal teaches us is that the only true perfection, really, of every single person without exception, even if we don't realize it yet, it's dveikut Hashem. Not having, that's perfection. Not having the perfect house, not having the perfect dress, the perfect husband, the perfect kids, the perfect career, the perfect home, the perfect body, okay? Actually, what we should be striving for is this incredible relationship with Hashem. Because when we have dveikut like Hashem, really powerful love, like we're talking about love that's bonding us to Hashem, that's when we're really alive. That's what the pasuk tells us. It says, "Vatem dvekim," right? Hashem Elokechem chayim kolchem hayom. Those are the ones that are really alive. and closeness to Hashem is our good. That's what really is ultimately going to be good in the world when we have that closeness to Hashem. But so that's what's so interesting, and that the Ramchal actually explains to us in his author's preface that there's a big problem. What's the problem? Here we have this lofty purpose. We need to be expanding our nishamot and all that. And he says, yeah, we have very few people, teachers or rabbis, that can teach us Avodat Hashem, how to do this. They don't teach us about how we can get Beikut or how we can grow spiritually. And everyone's going to tell you, yeah, it's important, but people don't spend time in it. Okay, like we're studying Torah, we're studying Gemara, Parsha Shavua, all this stuff, and we spend it on our whole lives. But when it comes to this foundation of everything, meaning our personal relationship with Hashem, somehow we're not prioritizing it. Like, unfortunately, for the most part, it's not in our yeshivot, it's not in our day schools, it's not in our high schools, it's not in our Batei Midrash, it's not in our yeshivot, Gewalt, it's not, okay? It's barely there. And so what this means, chas v'shalom, is that we can go through our whole spiritual lives asleep at the wheel, okay? You went through and you missed it. Right, so of course, we do need to study all areas of Torah. It's not that, but especially this one. And yet we can spend hours, right? Getting degrees for our careers or work, or hours in leisure time online, watching TV, or a lot of, wasting time on stuff. But not only secular pursuits, we can spend tons of hours on Torah study. I had a 16-year proper religious education, in a religious day school, and then afterwards in Stern College. I learned Talmud and everything, but I didn't even have one class actually improving my connection with Hashem, okay? And if this is really numero uno, the number one thing, expanding our neshamot, our main number one purpose in life, then why aren't we studying this more? Or at least more than everything else? It's funny, like I said, like I didn't have anybody like in the Kung Fu, I'm dating myself with the series, like I say, grasshopper, this is what you have to do. We didn't have it. But Baruch Hashem, what we do have is a Ramchal, and he left us this eternal legacy of how we can really become closer to Hashem, build on Hashemot. And today, this contemporary, we have, if you know of Bilvavi, building a sanctuary in our hearts, we have Rav Itamar Schwartz, who also is just amazing, who focuses on this important study. And one thing before we get into it, we talk about this path. The path really is different when we study Mesilat Yesharim. I always say when we start the classes, we have to make a switch. We have to be in a different state of mind. Because what are we studying? Avodat Hashem, like how do you get closer to Hashem? That's not like studying math or calculus, okay? So, in the Ramchal, every class with all of his content, he always makes us go deep, change our perception, okay? We really can't study soul development any other way. And, the words come off the pages, but we have to try to sync them with our minds and with our hearts. And that's not easy work, ladies. It's really not. Take it from me, we're trying, we've been doing this. So today's short lesson is from The Power of the Pause, actually comes from chapter 2 of Mesilat Yesharim, from a chapter called The Trait of Watchfulness. And it's actually the beginning of that ladder that you saw. And the Ramchal starts off the chapter by telling us, look, what's the idea of watchfulness? Is a person has to be careful of how they conduct themselves, what you do, your actions. You have to really think. And I'm saying that think because we don't think. Think about the things that you do, review your actions and habits, and decide, are they good? Are they right? Are they not? Are they appropriate? Are they inappropriate? This is one of the things that we start off with. Why? Because a person needs to be careful. And there's two reasons. If we're not careful, we can have accidents, okay? Or bad actions. Or if we're not careful, we're not going to be thinking people. Meaning to start off with with carefulness, it has a practical purpose to save us from accidents or harm in the physical world. But actually this same concept of carefulness or watchfulness, okay, should also save us from accidents or bad choices in the spiritual world, okay? So the Ramchal teaches us, when we have to review our actions, he's saying, look, the world is full of things that distance us from Hashem. And like today, life is like walking through a minefield. The amount of negative attractions, okay, is mind-boggling and staggering. And I'm talking from somebody who came from this business, okay, which is a person more than ever needs to be watchful, more than ever. But the Ramchal also says, not just your actions, he says, but what about your habits? Meaning those things that we do by rote and he means religious observance. He said all those years ago is that we do things robotically, okay, by rote, meaning the person on the left here is like davening, okay, meaning we keep kosher, we keep Shabbat, many mitzvot, everything's like on autopilot. And Rav Schwartz also says that, the Ramchal, it's an analogy to our times. We don't think about what we do. It's all routine and habit. And we need to be watchful also that our ruchaniyut doesn't end up becoming like, robotic and like we're walking dead in our spirituality. Now, the interesting thing is that in the physical world, we do realize that we need to be careful and watch ourselves. No one's going to take a swim in a shark-infested ocean, right? And no one here is also going to decide not to bother to read their prescription medication, just pop whatever in there, okay? A normal, rational person will not do something that can potentially endanger their lives. But what about the spiritual world? The same principle has to apply, right? Cruelty, theft, anger, disrespecting a parent, not helping maybe when we can, lashon hara. There's so many things that can damage our nishamot, watching violent or sexually graphic television or novels. There's so much out there. But when it comes to the spiritual world, all of a sudden, hey, we think we can be evil Knievel. We're daredevils. We don't have to be careful. Sure, let's skydive, without a parachute in our spiritual realms. And it can't be. And the Ramchal says, do we realize that the spiritual dangers truly exist? Hey, spirituality is real. The problem is we don't really think of it as real. And the Ramchal says we end up going like blind people walking on the edge of a river when it comes to spirituality. We're suddenly these kamikazes, and we just spiritual suicide. We just don't even pay attention. And he said, what, would you take your eyes off the road if you were driving down a highway? Never, you would never do that. You know that. All these PSAs not to text and drive, okay? But for some reason in our spiritual lives, we think we can. All of a sudden we can scream at somebody, or even little things, even being critical. And yet every single second, a person has a choice. He has the power to do something good or something bad. And every action, yes, it does, it counts. And the thing is, if we perceive the spiritual world as being real, our reality. So this power of the pause starts off with this interesting section. So, because the Ramchal says that when it comes to our spiritual reality, he explains that there's forces at work against us. He said, like when a person doesn't take this time to be watchful, like we're saying, or like takes their eyes off the road, doesn't, not careful with their spiritual selves, he says we're in constant danger. And he says it's similar, and this is from the Ramchal's work, he says it's similar to the wicked Paro, who commanded intensify the men's labor, with his purpose was what? To keep them constantly busy with work in order to deprive them of the opportunity to reflect. He's saying this big, terrible thing that Paro did was all just to keep us busy so we wouldn't think of what? Of Hashem. He says, let the labor fall heavy on the men and let them work at it. And don't talk about false matters. What's this about? So Paro didn't want Am Yisrael to be redeemed. He didn't want the Geulah. He saw in the stars. He knew there was going to be a Moshe Rabbeinu redeemer. So what did he do? Give them work, heavy work, keep them busy all the time, all the time, all the time. So they can't cry out to Hashem. They can't even be in touch with Hashem. And not Torah prohibitive work, by the way. He started with work that they weren't even going to rebel against. And what false matters? They wanted to go out and sacrifice. They wanted to have Avodat Hashem. So he wanted to make it that doesn't exist. And this is what the evil Paro's plan was to do that. And the Rav explains that there is a galut, an exile, okay? The Mitzrayim was a galut, but a spiritual blackness that is caused by what? A heavy workload. Now, look what happened, okay? The people, Am Yisrael was so busy, they didn't even have time to listen to Moshe Rabbeinu. And it said, Moshe spoke to them. He wanted to tell them, but they didn't listen. Why? They had kotzer ruach, shortness of breath. They had no time to breathe. Does that sound a little familiar? And what was Moshe Rabbeinu saying? He was saying, hey, the big Geulah is coming. Hashem's going to redeem you with an outstretched arm. He's going to keep the brit of the avod. Hashem's going to be our God. He's going to take us to Eretz Yisrael. And the people couldn't hear him. They couldn't hear Moshe Rabbeinu because they were too busy. And it was only when Paro died and there was a switch of Paros, they had a minute of respite and they cried out to Hashem and they remembered. And with that one sigh, by the way, they merited the redemption. But they needed that break. They needed that pause. And we say that the root of galut, this exile, is actually not having time. Galut is a blackness when Hashem's presence is concealed, when nearly all traces of our relationship that we have with Hashem have gone. It's disappeared. We don't feel Hashem's love for us, and we don't feel like his children. And we may study the Torah and we follow the commandments, and we're told that we're going to connect with him, but we don't feel it. We don't feel it. And this galut is like a spiritual blackness. That's why, interesting enough, in the Hebrew, for those who can read the Hebrew, look at redemption and Geulah. Geulah, redemption, and galut, the spiritual exile. The only difference between these is aleph. It's having Hashem there. Okay, so there's the galut, though, which you need to talk about, where there's no time to think, no time to contemplate. So Hashem is absent from our lives. Okay, this is a galut. So we all say, yeah, that terrible Paro and that galut of Mitzrayim, it was all that time ago, thousands of years ago. Well, ladies, no. Welcome to your world. We are in Paro's clutches today more than they were in Mitzrayim, more than ever. No one has time to breathe. We've been completely trained in a fast-paced world where everything is constantly hectic, right? Just from that alone, we need to understand that it's the work of the Yetzer Hara. He wants to destroy us spiritually. Get it quicker, faster, now, always available, 24/7, do not stop, no downtime. Our whole world is ADHD on steroids, fast food, Amazon Prime. Get it right away, watch it right away, watch it on demand, on command, answer your messages right away, instant messaging, you're always accessible. What's the problem? Isn't this progress? The problem is that this leaves you no time or space to think, just like, unfortunately, our avot in Mitzrayim. And this is the Yetzer Hara's great strategy. So the problem is ultimately we have to respond to the same warp speed of our environment. We need to keep up the pace. If you didn't get back your WhatsApp 123, why didn't you text me back? So again, the Rav explains there's a galut, a spiritual blackness that is caused by a heavy workload. Now, I'm assuming that most of you and your husbands all even have jobs that they're not going to violate halakha, but there's still a burden for a person. And the Rav says we need to block out some of this noise. We're all in this fast-paced, noisy world, and with these noisy lives. And a person is lacking this basic quiet with this noisiness. It's no wonder that so many of today's diseases are, stress-related, dis-ease, lack of ease. And the Rav teaches us that this noisiness, that's the Yetzer Hara. Really, he says, that's the strategist, the warrior. That's it. We thought it was something else. We thought maybe you thought you had a little angel, a little devil sitting on your shoulder telling you don't do that. No, it's keeping you busy so you don't have time to think, okay? And he says what we need to do is acquire ourselves less noisy environment, and then we can have time to reach our neshamot, which are so concealed under there, okay? And it's actually the less noise with nishamot that allows them to grow and expand. They can't in all of this chaos. So basically we said it's a fact that Hashem created a world that functions with time and space. So we need to work within this reality of Hashem's creation. Now, everything has a place in space, right? No two things occupy the same space. And a person needs space, guys, okay? Same with a man and woman. Why do you think we have nida? We need space also, okay? Kids need space. Hovering over kids is not gonna help them, okay? Sometimes we need space from our kids too. God forbid, really, if kids didn't sleep, I don't know what young mothers would do. Okay, sleeping gives us space. But the Rav says this space, okay, creating this space in your life is a shorish, is a root for everything of building your spiritual self. For yourself, your soul development is a space. You need to get some space between you and everything else in your life, because only in this space can your spirituality develop. So, and it's something obviously you're gonna have to do alone, because I'm telling you, you have to get your space. So how do you get this space? So you first need to make space. And here's another problem, ladies, is that let's say you want to drink. You can't use a full cup to, go to the faucet. You need an empty one to fill it up. But so when a person is so full with their lives, with so much stuff, whether it's their ego, their anger, their activities, whatever, they don't really even have a vessel to fill in with something new. And for a person to build themselves, they have to create some space for themselves. Our souls desperately need this space. Most people today, they rush through everything and they don't get to this deeper place. They're just full and they get more and more everything and it just spills out. And we said, we compare it to like a closet. It's so full, you can't get anything else in there without it avalanching. That's our lives. Yesharim makes sure that the person is busy from morning until night without stopping 24/7. And that way they won't have any time to expand their nishamot. And by the way, a person can be rushing around doing chesed. They're rushing around going from one shiur to another shiur, volunteer work, reading Tehillim, and evening, giving shiurim. But their neshama isn't there because even if a teacher or Rav wants to tell us something, we can't listen because our closets are so full. We don't have a place to even digest what they have to say. We can't even hear it. So we're told the first thing to do is work on emptying this closet so we can have a vessel. So part of the work of a person for Avodat Hashem is to feel that we're an empty vessel, at least a vessel that has some room or some space to acquire some of this kedusha. So this is where we say that we have to hit the pause button. All of the Avodah is based on this, meaning your first starting point is to carve out some space in your life. I'm not talking about hitbada doing stuff like that, which is another thing that we do and we teach and all that. I'm talking about that you cannot expand your neshama or even get in touch with this neshama, okay, if you don't create some space to be even conscious of this neshama. The Rav says the first part of this is a person should put aside some quiet time. How much quiet time? How do you do this? Taking a break between activities and just only talking about even a 1 minute break. But a person, he said, shouldn't move from one activity to another, to another, to another, to another. We need to stop for a minute and create this break. Even if it's like getting from the kids getting ready in the morning to tefillah to shopping, start to think of having a pause, a morning, afternoon, and evening pause that you integrate into your life between activities. It makes you wait a minute before starting the new thing. And it could, like I say, before you turn on your computer, before, after you have your coffee, but 1 minute. And the depth of this work is a pause. So what are you going to do in this minute? Our nishamot, we're told, need this pause, like I said, desperately, the starting point, because it's going to reveal our nishamot. And what do? Nothing. Nothing. You thought I was asking a lot, but I'm not. Rob says we have to create space, meaning to stop all other thinking and activities. By the way, it's very hard to stop thinking, but this is one of the problems. There gets blah, 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 blah. And we can't even daven properly because we're thinking of the million things we have to do today. If you spend time thinking about something specific in this pause, like your menu planning or your to-do list, then you've actually not created that empty space that we're talking about. Instead of doing some kind of action, not work, not cleaning, not diaper change, nothing, just take 1 minute, okay? And even a person, like I said, who busies themselves with Torah reading, Tehillim, and acts of chesed, this is still not creating this quiet place for the neshama or the soul to expand, the root of building ourselves. So it's interesting, by the way, if any of you like Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan's books, or if you've studied some Kabbalah, it's very interesting that prophecy was attained. Actually, one of the methods was by thinking of nothing. Nothing. What is that? But it's basically this nothingness. We're not trying to achieve prophecy, obviously, but it's just to be able to say, I'm a neshama. Wait, block out all this Yetzer Hara stuff, and wait, I'm a neshama. Now, if a person doesn't give themselves the time of like not speaking, not doing nothing, not cleaning your mind entirely, not thinking of anything, alone, okay, no activity, no game, nothing, it says you can't really expand your neshama. Or this is actually the skill that you need to do that. So this is like our neshama tool. Even the Talmud tells us that sometimes a person needs to stop their thinking, because that thinking, rushing around, like I said, it's a part of the noisiness. So this is the starting point for our spiritual activities. It's in this space that we're going to be able to develop watchfulness as well. Now, I have another Rabbanit in one of our classes. She's a graphic artist, and interesting. She said, look at the symbol for the pause. What do you see? What do you see in the symbol of the pause? I'm sure you see what I see. You see Yud Yud, you see Hashem, right? So that's very interesting too. Like Hashem is in this pause. And by the way, this pause is something that should be very familiar to all of us. Why? Because of the big pause, the whole concept of Shabbat, of resting and taking a break. That's the big pause. I know people that if they weren't, religious, they would continue working like maniacs. Some people in my own family, it's only because of Shabbat that they have the pause, the earpiece comes out, the laptop's closed, the device shuts down, Is it any wonder that there are worldwide campaigns to even keep one Shabbat and people are rushing to do it, or even non-Jews to disconnect because they want to decompress? Because, the amazing thing is that Hashem built into our lives this big pause. Look at on the Rashi, what it says on this pasuk in Breshit, where it says, and we said that, right? What did Hashem do? He completed on the seventh day the work that he did, and he abstained on the seventh. And Rashi says, and God completed on the seventh day. What was the world lacking? The world was lacking rest. It was lacking that pause that would connect our nishamot back to Hashem. So ultimately, Paro's plan couldn't work or shouldn't work, even modern craziness, right? Because we're still guarding our pause. Because Hashem's creation of nature, he kind of built in this thing that we have to have this pause and we have to keep connected to him. But if God forbid we don't use this pause, even Shabbat, sometimes Shabbat is all about what are we going to cook, cleaning up after the guest, giving the guest, running to shul, but without really the whole point of this pause, okay? But we said, just like Hashem created time and space, he made this big pause so we can always disengage from this Yetzer Hara and this treadmill. So the evil Yetzer is trying to destroy our vessels, ladies, because as Ramchal says, he's a warrior and a strategist. And see, it's just using this insidious, nefarious, you're so busy all the time to really get us not to be in touch with the Nishamot. So time and space are the root of building ourselves, but they're also the destruction, wasting this time. But the biggest destruction is if we don't even have a vessel period, meaning we can't even absorb any Kedusha. And that's what this power of the pause is, that it's creating our vessels, it's creating a place of nishama, a place where we can focus and say, hey, I'm a nishama. I'm not just a goof, I'm a nishama. I'm not just a body, I'm a nishama. And to ultimately afterwards, of course, we need to fill that with Kedusha. But then I say, in terms of let's getting practical, I say everyone really should choose a daily pause. Now, by the way, we're only talking about a 1-minute pause between two activities that you do. Like I said, between maybe coffee or tefillah, checking an email or going shopping, and you're just going to spend 1 minute, time it. By the way, at the beginning, it's almost impossible for people feel, the woman was like, to have 1 minute where they didn't think of something was hard. But that's the goal, to really just be there and say, if you can't think of nothing, just think, hey, I'm in a Shema, okay? Or if you can be in a higher level, but that's even, not necessary, the En Od Milvado, right? But the idea is that we have to stop our minds. It can be an En Od Milvado moment, there is nothing but Hashem moment. And it can just be, or just, I'm here, I'm in a Shema, and I realize that this is all, a veil and Hashem exists, but spend a minute on this and just let your neshama be revealed. And if you could do this 3 minutes, a morning, afternoon, and evening. And the women in our group are doing it, and they've really felt that they've had major advancements because of this. Ultimately, we always talk about in Mesilat Yesharim, the realization is the En Od Milvado, and we always say, how different would our lives really look if we knew today and we settled in our hearts, right, that Hashem is, God in heaven and the earth. There is nothing else. There is nothing else. But ultimately, all this busyness, this Yetzer Hara, really is nothing else. It's really Hashem. But to be able to get into that, to be able to move back into that, we need that power of the pause. So I would, Bezrat Hashem, say it'd be wonderful if ladies could adopt the power of the pause to help, reveal your nishamot. And that is the lesson of the power of the pause. Also, if anyone would want to join our classes in Mesilat Yesharim, there is one that's at night, that's in the morning, I think in US time.
I'll share it, Rhonda. I just want to tell you, it's so unbelievable, this group, because we get exposed to so many different ways of teaching. And what was so
Right.
amazing is that you took your creativity of who you are. You're like this amazing creative human being who has done so much, and you infused it and you brought it to everybody through Torah. And it's so incredible. Like, it's like so amazing to get that taste of how individualized and how beautiful and how precious each person is and what they each one has to offer. And like, I was reading again your bio, like, oh my gosh, Rhonda, like you were involved in even bringing Ted Koppel, Nightline, et cetera, all these amazing shows on an international level. And you did this, like, you took your creativity. It's like so beautiful. It's so amazing. And
I do have a
infused it,
visual
and you gave
side.
us this whole production, and it was just amazing. It was so amazing. Thank you so much. I loved
You're
it.
all more than welcome. And Bismat, I asked you to join us really to study this Lamaisa, because I see in this group